You know the whole Ghostbusters, I ain't afraid of no ghost thing? Well, I was indeed afraid of all the ghosts for most of my life. And this episode is all about how my supernatural, psychic, mediumistic journey was one of fear for most of my life so far. But the good news is that we're going to talk about that fear, its purpose, what it's teaching me now, and what I think it will teach me to come, along with, of course, several supernatural encounters, because that's what I'm doing now. I'm just telling you about them. Again, with the purpose of engaging a deeper experience with the spiritual, not just one that's about jump scares, although there is a lot of jumping and a lot of scaring in these stories, but the lessons are much different than what you'll hear anywhere else. So when I was 4 and maybe even 3.5, like it's possible, I think, that I have some of these memories from when I was 3.5, because it's one of the first houses that I lived in when I was younger. And I had this recurring sort of vision that would happen in my room. It was something I actually physically saw in my room when I was just 4 years old. And it was a spider, but it was a creepy looking spider with a face. And I hated it. There would be this sense of dread, like I'd wake up in my bed and I would see this spider. It would be looking at me. I just had this horrible feeling whenever it was around. It would scurry around my room. And sometimes it would be in my actual nightmares and it could talk. That's the creepiest thing. It could talk. Now, to this day, I don't remember what it said. Its voice wasn't like demonic in the way that you would expect from like a creepy movie. There was nothing special about its voice other than every time it spoke, it just sounded creepy, but it wasn't an overly dramatic voice. This spider disappeared as I aged, but alongside this time, beginning again at 3.5, 4, I also would have night terrors, most often involving snakes, where I'd wake up and see a snake snapping at me by my bed, or or I would wake up and I'd think I'd be standing in a pool of snakes. So, I mean, night terrors where I'd wake up and see things happened pretty frequently. And into my adult life, kind of close to, well, in my 20s in college, I remember I would wake up. I slept alone a lot in my later years in college in an apartment, and sometimes I would wake up and see images of people. I didn't know who they were, but they scared the crap out of me. And so oftentimes I would just sleep with the light on. And you add in some real traumatic events related to, assault and things like that. And that leads to just a lot of nightmares in general. And I didn't realize it until my early 30s, early to mid 30s, when my husband pointed out to me that sleep for me kind of is defined as the place where I go to have nightmares. And it's kind of like that's the mindset I had, is that, okay, well, this is where I'm going to go to have my nightmares. And there were lots of times where I would wake up screaming because I'd see something next to my bed or something like that. So this all changed when, my psychic mediumistic gifts began to awaken. It changed in that, the nightmares became less frequent. My dreams changed to learning grounds, but occasionally there would still be apparitions and they would still be terrifying. Now, I know the scientific community describes these, what some would call hallucinations, as just something that appears between when you're awake and when you're asleep. Sure, obviously, I'm not going to deny neuroscience, but why can't it also be a spiritual experience? Because I can tell you from experience, I don't think what I'm seeing when I'm half awake, kind of half asleep, is just a hallucination. And here's the thing, like I am mostly awake when I see these things because I also remember it, it's something that I can very clearly point to. But like I said, as I started coming into my gifts, it was less frequently scary things and more often messages, from my guides. But to to make a point about this, I I want to share one story, and I talked about sharing this story in my last episode. And once I do, then I can kind of explain where the role that fear plays in all of this and why I spent such a huge part of my life being afraid to go to sleep. And this particular apparition appeared 2023 to fall of 2023. Yep. So again, no, first I woke up and no. Sorry, blurring memories together. I was falling asleep and I said to my husband, "Does it smell like fried chicken to you? I smell fried chicken." And we're vegetarians, so there's not a whole lot of fried chicken in our house. And he's like, "No, I don't smell it." I was like, "I swear to God, I smell fried chicken." But I kind of just dismissed it and went to sleep. Well, not a few minutes later, however, within the hour, I wake up and I see the apparition of a woman who I recognized when she was still alive. And this apparition was Barb, my husband's Aunt Barb, who passed away, I believe, in fall of 2022. And it was very clearly her outline. Okay. I couldn't see a clear face, but it's more like this knowing of, oh my God, that's Barb. Like the outline looked like her when I met her, but it's more just again the sense of, yep, that's Barb. And I saw her and I'm like, ah, like I screamed because what are you gonna do when you see an apparition? And I told my husband about it, and he's like, yeah, I sense her too. She was standing on his side of the bed. He wasn't in the bed at the time. He had gotten up to go do something, and she was just there. And it scared the shit out of me. You know, I calmed a little bit shortly after that, but as I was telling him about it, he's like, yeah, it definitely was Barb, but she probably didn't want to scare you, But like I said, my husband's family, they're all very big and bold characters. So the point of this is not just the fear, okay? It's not just about seeing this apparition of my husband's aunt. The point is what happened after. So because this was such a clear apparition and it was accompanied by a smell, I don't often like smell things related to spirits. Occasionally I do. But my probably strongest psychic sense is my hearing. So smell does happen for me occasionally where I will smell something associated with a spirit and the spirit will appear, but it's very rare. So Barb's spirit really was incredibly potent because the fried chicken was in fact connected to her. Because what I realized is it's like, oh my God, this is why she picked fried chicken. So I didn't know Barb for very long before she passed. My husband and I got married in April of 2022. I didn't see her until like July of 2022. And then I had a baby in August of 2022. So I was kind of, laid up at home. And then she passed, I believe, in October or so of 2022. So I really only saw her once when she was alive. And one of the clearest things that I remember is her pointing out to me that her son's girlfriend's family had brought this fried chicken, a big old bucket of fried chicken, to the family 4th of July celebration. And for whatever reason, she felt the need to point that out to me. So I was like, oh yeah, and I remember, when she was alive, when this happened, thinking, what the hell is with the fried chicken? Good for her bringing the fried chicken. Like, I didn't think it was a big deal. Little did I know that was going to be Barb's calling card for me a few months later after her passing. So I think the fried chicken smell came because she knew that I would remember and it would help connect me to her. Well, this was so strong. Between the smell of fried chicken and the apparition, I felt the need to tell this indigenous woman who I was working with at the time about what happened because she believed in spirits and I knew that I could talk to her about it. And after telling her this story, a day or two later, she brought a book for me. And it was written by someone named Cindy, can't remember the last name now, but it was about awakening your clairaudient senses. Like, she's a local psychic in Minneapolis, and she wrote this book specifically about clairaudience, right? Psychic hearing. And this woman who I worked with just gave that to me. And this is the point, is that Barb's entrance was rather dramatic, and Barb has, not as of late, but for a while, she would appear to me in different ways and help me, with some things that I was working on, some things I needed to help with. She definitely was incredibly present. But her appearing so dramatically helped guide me on my path of psychism. If she had not appeared the way that she did, I never would have asked, I never would have brought it up to the woman who I worked with, and she never would have given me this book, because this clairaudience book was actually the very first book I ever read about psychic things. And it helped open me to my gifts. And what's interesting is this woman who I worked with didn't even necessarily know that hearing was my strongest psychic sense, because what's interesting is the story I told her didn't have anything to do with hearing. It had to do with sight and smell, which are two, like I said, senses I don't work with a whole lot. And so there's definitely some spiritual involvement here, right? Barb's appearance wasn't just about the jump scare, although she did successfully accomplish that. It put me on a path. It led me to tell a story that led me to a book that deepened my journey to learning about myself and about my gifts. And this is what our interaction with spirit is supposed to be. It's not just supposed to be the jump scare. It's supposed to set us on a path. It's supposed to open us to our divine selves. It's supposed to lead us somewhere. And that was just the beginning. I continued to learn and continued to explore. And I have a different relationship with fear now. Like I said, I still occasionally will see fearful apparitions, but I know the difference now. I know the difference between evil things that are appearing and the difference between my guides telling me something or showing me something, because I see all kinds of things at my bedside at night. And it sounds really creepy in theory, but when you're in the moment, when I know it's something benevolent, something helpful, it doesn't scare me at all. I just kind of wake up, look at it, hear it, whatever it might be, and then I journal it the next day. Occasionally, I do jump up and scream when I see some other types of things by my bedside, but it's over quickly. I tell it to leave, and generally it's over by then. So, what purpose did this fear serve? Because a huge portion of my life, I was afraid to go to bed at night. Like, I didn't even tell you guys this, but I'm going to have a vulnerable moment because I know some people out there need to hear it. I would get so scared to sleep at night because of my nightmares, because even through my teenage years, I had a couple episodes even of like sleep paralysis. Like I had, where I'd wake up and I'd think something was on me. I've had this very long relationship with spirity things happening at night, so much so that when I was a teenager, I'd be scared to go to bed. And sometimes I would stay up all night and finally go to bed at 6 a.m. Or I would sleep on the floor next to my parents' bed because I was too scared to sleep alone. Because I was always, sensing things. I was having these nightmares. So here's the reason for the fear, okay? And there's a couple of them. And I hope that by sharing it with you, it can help you on your journey with all of this. And even if you're not having some kind of psychic journey, maybe it'll help you with something else. So when I was younger, right, and I was seeing the spider, these snakes, or whatever it might be, I have a couple theories about why it was so fearful for me when I was young. Number one, little bodies house big souls, right? I believe that our souls are infinite, that we have past lives, and that we carry the memory of that with us. It's not always immediately accessible, but I believe our souls, our divine spirit, is ancient. Yet when we choose to incarnate in the bodies that we're in now, we're little for a while. And it's this little body, this little brain holding this big soul. So when I was a kid, I was holding this ancient soul and this ancient power in a tiny little body. And sometimes that showed up in the form of fear, right? I also didn't have control of my psychic gifts at that point. So yeah, I think the spider was some sort of evil thing that had gotten through. Some of the dreams about snakes, right? Snakes represent energy. I might have been tapping into the energy around me. And so I believe this fear was my psychic gifts working, but I was in a little body and didn't know how to hold it. I also think the fear was there to protect me because I didn't know it when I was little, but I was tapping into spiritual things. Sure, some of it was demonic, some of it was not. And if I had expressed that, if I had expressed that I believed that I was, sensing demons or sensing, or talking to angels or whatever it might be, well, it wouldn't have been safe to talk about that when I was a kid and when I was a teenager because, I was raised in the church. So anything spiritual was seen as demonic or as non-existent, right? The ghost spirits in the Christian church are kind of seen as um again, either evil, pretty much demonic, or that they're not real. That's a very common thing that you're taught is that they're not real. And so if I would have come forward with this, I would have likely just been thought of as insane. I would have likely just, you know, I think a lot of damage would have been done. So by being afraid of these things that I was seeing and hearing, well, then I wasn't going to talk about them. I wasn't going to say that it was real because if I had, it probably wouldn't have been safe. So I think the fear at that point was protecting me. As I aged, I think some of the trauma that I went through in my life was starting to impact my dreams. And so some of what I was experiencing was a mix of processing some trauma from my waking life and tapping into my gifts. But the point is, the fear was there to protect me. And when I was ready, when the time was right, when I had the proper support in place, meaning I had tools, resources, people who believed, because part of the thing is that I was kind of stunted when it comes to my gifts because I did not have access to people who could educate me about them. And I wouldn't have even known where to seek it out, right? But once I was with the right partner and working with the right people and connected to various psychics and mediums and books that I could read, well, then it was safe for me to really start working with this and not fearing it. And here's the thing, a lot of things that we have nightmares about too are sometimes our own gifts, but we're afraid of them. Right? So like at night I had this intense spiritual stuff going on, but I was still afraid of it. But once I started working with it, then it kind of became my friend, right? And I'm not talking about the evil things that appear. I'm talking about my psychic gifts in general. Now my dreams are some of my favorite places in the world because I get to access spirit in a way that's more challenging when I'm awake. And when I say spirit, I mean the energy around me. I mean my higher self, my own soul. I mean my spirit guides. I mean my ancestors who've passed on because they appear in my dreams quite a bit. Now I love my dreams. I'm not afraid. I'm in a safe place where I can talk about it, where I can interact with it. And if something is scary, well, now I know the difference between things that are just showing up to help me and things that are trying to scare me. And I can tell those things to leave. The psychic who I saw in Arizona actually even picked up on that. I'm sure my guides told her, but she says, your guides also say, don't be afraid. She told me that a couple of years ago. She said, yeah, you're afraid of some of the evil on the other side, but you're powerful. You don't need to be. You can tell them to leave. And even just her calling out how afraid I've been my whole life was an act of freedom. And I hope that you learn by now that none of this stuff is solved overnight. Everything having to do with healing is a journey. And I don't mean to be cheesy or frustrating, because again, I can relate. I am someone who just likes to get there, move on to the next thing, finish my task. I struggle when timelines don't move in the way that I want them to. But freedom, especially freedom from the things that used to scare us, comes in pieces. But along the way, there's remarkable things, right? I've learned remarkable things related to the spirits who show up for me. And what's cool is that they show up in different ways. It's not just the things that appear by my bedside. It's not just things I hear with my clairaudient gifts. In the last year or so, I've been studying the natural world and how spirits communicate through animals and plants and the earth just around me, the sky, the soil, everything. And so what's cool is that about, you just not being done is that by not being done, you're open to learning more and experiencing the richness that is life. Right? And so fear served the purpose. It was hard. Like, I'm not going to lie to you, it was hard having so many shitty nights, but I believe that's what I needed at the I believe that it protected me, and that again, if I had spoken out about my gifts or believed any of what I believe now, I think I would have been ridiculed, or I would have gotten really depressed because I didn't have the tools or the people I needed around me to help grow those gifts. I was still looking to the church for help, and they would not have helped me. They would have tried to exorcise me. And I know because I've seen them do it. So the fear was a protection. And now that I'm in the right place, I can live out that gift. But I also, because of what I went through with some of that fear, I can help people. I can help my own kids because some of my kids have the gift and night terrors and things like that. So I can work with them. But that is the story of Barb and the fried chicken. That is the story of my fear and learning to work with the things I see at my bedside, the things I hear, the things I smell, and just not to live, in anticipation of every night being a place where I go to just have nightmares. Now I look forward to falling asleep because, again, the access that I have to spirit. And I have to point out my husband's role in that. He's really good at naming things sometimes. And just by him, because it's amazing, especially like if you meet your partner later in life, it's amazing what we do that we don't know we do, right? Those subconscious things that just become habit. Just by him calling out, it seems like you just expect nightmares every night because that's what you've had. And your expectation when you fall asleep is, okay, this is where I'm going to go to have my nightmares. Even though, like, I hated him, I didn't realize it till he said it out loud, but I'm like, oh my God, that's exactly what happens. I expect to have nightmares at night. And just by him saying that, that it seems like you expect to have them, it opened me up to the possibility that maybe it didn't have to be that way, right? And because he said that, I realized I might have more control over my dreaming life, over my sleep life than I think I do. How can I start working with this? And then hence the journey with opening to my psychic gifts and opening to dream work and reading about it and all of that. So if there's someone you love in your life who has a habit, they may not be aware of it. Don't underestimate your power to let them know, of course, as respectfully as possible, but like, hey, I've noticed, because you might think they know, but they don't always know. So it doesn't matter if it's about spirit or the physical or whatever it is. If there's someone who you love who might be caught in like a doom cycle of something, they may not be aware. They may not know that they're caught there and that they actually might have some control over it. So please speak up. This is the time to speak up in general. There's no better time than now. And thank you for joining me on this spiritual journey. I mean, I haven't even scratched the surface of all the stories that I've told, but please always remember that the purpose of me telling you about these apparitions, these smells, these spirity things, is so that you can hear more stories besides just the jump scares and the stories about people poking at ghosts and things like that, because I'm just going to say it. That's not what our relationship is supposed to be with them. We're not just supposed to look around for haunted things and bother them. We're not supposed to go to these horrific places where tragedies happen and all kinds of shitty energy is just stored up and festering. We're not supposed to go poke at that shit, okay? There's other ways of interacting with spirit. And now more than ever, we need to bring it back. We need to reconnect with spirit. It is the thing that's going to save us all, because I truly believe it is the disconnection from our own spirit, from our spirit guides, from our ancestors and loved ones who've passed on, that has caused so much trauma and pain in the world. We're much less likely to dehumanize others, to seek out material comforts, to buy our way to quote unquote happiness, but we all know we don't actually get there. We're far less likely to engage in all of that when we begin to remember who we are, and that we are a divine spirit that has chosen the body that we are in, that has chosen to be divine, and that we have a very specific way of living that out on earth and connecting with others around us, both the living spirits around us, our fellow humans who are still on this side, but also those who've passed on, also the spirits of nature, also our spiritual guides, angels, all of that. It is connection to this that's going to heal everything. So please share this episode if you think it could help someone, or any of my other episodes. Like I said, I'm in the hundreds now. So again, thank you so much to my new listeners. I see you. I appreciate you. Thank you to my returning listeners. I'm always grateful for you too. And again, please share if you feel there's somebody who could connect to this. But in the meantime, thanks for coming.